I had to close the air conditioning. I realized that a lot of the last video where I talked about the poetry of Cheryl and War was probably marred by all these background air conditioning sounds. So, um, not that I think it really matters. It probably doesn't even really matter because the message was still kind of put across about that, and the background noise is just kind of a little bit of a distraction. But because it's so drony, it probably doesn't really influence it that much. Anyway, sorry. The book I just recently, one of the book that I most recently finished is the Dao De Jing by Laozi, or as the West calls him. This is translated by D.C. Lau. Laozi or Laozi is a very fascinating figure in Chinese philosophy, because of the fact that perhaps he didn't really exist in the same kind of manner that we traditionally believe that he supposedly did. The Dao De Jing, for those who are unfamiliar with it, is the foundational text in the religion Taoism. And what found interesting from reading the book, especially this translation in particular, was what I found very compelling about it was how much historical context the book kind of the translator D.C. Lau gives, and the particular context that I found very fascinating was the realization, or for me to find out that apparently Lao Tzu probably didn't exist, and there's a lot of scholarly debate about when the Tao Te Ching was actually written down. Actually, because I think technically Lao Tzu is the name of the text, not the name of any kind of author. Supposedly the text is called Lao Tzu, and Tao Te Ching is actually just like a compendium of the titles of the two books or something, because the book is kind of split up into these very short sayings of sorts, and it's like these short pieces of text. They're 81, and somewhere halfway through, it's split into book 1 and book 2, and apparently the phrase Tao Te Ching is just some kind of like combination of the names of what book 1 and book 2 are, but the whole text is actually called Lao Tzu. So is Lao Tzu a real person? Who knows? But what I found cool was that apparently there's a big issue with the text in terms of how it is interpreted, because it is highly dependent on whether or not you believe the book was actually created in the traditional understanding of things, which was in 6th century BC. And the reason why that is very interesting is because apparently the traditional way of reading the text is to think of him, of Lao Tzu, this fictional or probably real person who we don't exactly know who he is, but this person who wrote this text is actually kind of a mentor of Confucius. That is the traditional view of things. But then as scholarly research has kind of uncovered, the text was most likely actually written in 4th century BC, much after Confucius. And the reason why this is very important, I guess, if you're not very familiar with the history, it may not seem like a big deal, but I think it's because we kind of condense history from a very far back. But think of it today, it's like saying that the iPhone came out 200 years ago. It's a big deal. But primarily it's a big deal because when you kind of engage with the scriptural text, Tao Te Ching came up with Taoism, and Confucius popularized Confucianism. These are two separate religions embedded very strongly in the culture and philosophy of Chinese history. So to believe that the Tao Te Ching came out before Confucianism propagated would make you kind of have to engage with Confucianism in a way that makes you feel like it may be influenced by Taoism, or at least the Tao Te Ching. So it's definitely a big deal. Well, and about the text itself, it is mostly kind of, it's very aphoristic, right? You have a bunch of these 10, 12 line long sayings that are mostly oxymoronic, right? So to look at it structurally, a lot of them are very oxymoronic. For example, you get something like, let me see. Let's see. Sorry, I'm taking a while to look at this, but I'm just kind of, for example, it says here, what cannot be seen is called evanescent, what cannot be heard is called rarefied, what cannot be touched is called minute. This is not perhaps the best description. Here, the 5 colors make man's eyes blind. The 5 notes make ears deaf. The 5 tastes injure his palate. You get things like that. You get things about kind of, they'll say something, very kind of seemingly trivial, and then they'll repeat it, but say the opposite, and say that the opposite is just as equally true. You'll say the way is empty, yet use will not. The use will not drain it. Let's see. The whole world recognizes the beautiful as the beautiful, yet this is only the ugly. The whole world recognizes the good as the good, yet this is only the bad. Thus something and nothing produce each other, and the difficult and the easy complement each other. The long and the short offset each other. The high and the low incline towards each other. Note and sound harmonize with each other, and before and after follow each other. And the whole book is a bunch of those kind of oxymoronic aphorisms, and a lot of the underlying belief, it seems to be, is that there is a kind of nihilistic underpinning, I feel, that kind of nothing really inherently matters, and that the good and the bad are all equally true. Perhaps it means nothing is true, and what matters is what they call the way, and the way is that we should be like the water, and we should merely exist, and not have to think about or worry about any of the kind of qualities of existence that may make us feel one way or another, because thinking, and to some degree, gives you a sense of will lead towards suffering, and to think will cause you to suffer. Therefore, we should just exist like the water and not care where we are, and just we should just be of some sort. And it is very fascinating, I think, and very compelling, and to some degree, to read this in the perspective of just like how much of it influenced Buddhism as well, and a lot of it is about going with the flow of things, going with the way. There's like a whole section of the book I found very funny, which is like, it seems to be a very strong proponent of being lazy, or just not doing anything, and this thing about no action, don't really do anything, don't think, just sit there and be still and don't do anything. There is no need to do anything else, but just sit there, be still, breathe, be like the water. It's quite, I thought it was a great read. I thought it was quite fascinating, and has sparked a lot of interest for me in reading more about all these Buddhist texts. I'm actually reading something right now that I might end up talking a bit about, which is about Chan Buddhism. But I have all these other books I'm trying to read as well. I got this book recently called The Self-Overcoming Nihilism by Keiji Nishitani, a Japanese Buddhist. I'm engaging in all these new kinds of thought, because I've never really, I'm more familiar with the Christian, kind of, in terms of religion, I'm more familiar with Christianity, and to read another kind of religious text like the Dao De Jing was very fun for me. So yeah, that's a book I most recently finished. I'm about to finish, soon I'm gonna finish, I'm reading Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. I'm almost done with that, and I'm almost done with this Chan Buddhism book. And then after that, I think I'm gonna be reading Metaphors and Vision by Stan Brakhage. But yeah, anyway, that's some kind of preview of what's to come, but Great book. No matter what religion you are, I think it's worth a read.